Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us on another unseasonably clement day here in Durham, New Hampshire. Apparently, Puxatawny Phil did not see his shadow this morning, so by that measure, we're in for an early spring. And in a year of wacky weather, that's probably about as good as predictions get, so fingers crossed. In any event, greetings to everyone who is watching from our Concord and Manchester campuses or following us on the web. It's a great day to be a Wildcat. There we go. Every day is a great bit. I was hoping somebody was going to do that. And the state of the university is a great tradition that gives us the chance to step back and reflect on where UNH is today. And more importantly, it brings us together to talk about how we will create the UNH of tomorrow. To that end, we will once again host a town hall forum following my remarks. I can't promise that it will attract the same attention as the primary debate that's scheduled to take place in Johnson Theater on Thursday night, but I hope you will all stay and take part. And by the way, just for those of you who want to know, we don't control the ticket distribution. I don't think our office has ever had as many phone calls about anything as they have had about tickets. But stay tuned, there will be a lottery. If you haven't done so already, you can still submit questions for the Town Hall Forum via Twitter with the hashtag UNHSOTU or email them to unhsotu@unh.edu up on the screen. But with that, let's cut right to the chase. What is the state of the university in 2016? Usually, I answer that question by going through a list of the last 12 months' biggest milestones and most impressive institutional achievements. Research and teaching prizes, dollars raised, grants awarded, applications for admissions received, and so forth. But this year is different. It's different because in 2016, we mark UNH's 150th anniversary. That's a landmark. In fact, I think there are only 3 members of the faculty and staff remaining from the cohort that joined UNH in 1866. Seriously, though, this is a big deal, and we're going to recognize it in the year ahead. In addition to events across our campuses, we are planning some engaging, inspiring, and really fun ways to include everyone across the Granite State. Because UNH's birthday, the birthday of our state's public flagship university, is something for everyone in New Hampshire to embrace and celebrate. But first, I want to talk about why our sesquicentennial is about more than a celebration. Ours is a history with purpose and impact. Those of you who paid attention in American history class will note that UNH is older than the Transcontinental Railroad and the telephone. UNH was educating students, undertaking research, and serving the citizens of New Hampshire before the Wright brothers took flight, before the Statue of Liberty raised her arm in New York Harbor, before the Star-Spangled Banner became our national anthem. And for those of you who didn't pay attention in class, that means that UNH is even older than Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram combined. Well, what have we done in those years? Well, since 1866, UNH has provided nearly 200,000 students with an affordable world-class education. In fact, it's fair to say that UNH offered many of these students their only realistic access to an affordable world-class education. We've helped well over 10,000 small businesses to get started, grow, and thrive. We've contributed vital support to the farms, forests, and pristine natural resources that shape the Granite State's character and its nation-leading quality of life. We've nurtured the artists, volunteers, and nonprofits that enrich our culture and that make our cities and towns places where people want to live, work, and become involved in community life. We've sent thousands of young people to serve our nation, including many who paid the ultimate sacrifice, 18 in World War I, 155 in World War II, 17 in Korea, 39 in Vietnam, and 3 in recent conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. These examples of UNH's impact may seem diffuse, but they flow from the common source of our deeply public mission. UNH was created in 1866 pursuant to the Federal Moral Land Grant College Act of 1862 to serve the public good, to benefit in particular agriculture and the mechanic arts, as the language of the time had it. And 150 years later, in 2016, serving the public good is still our central purpose. Imagine, though, the counterfactual. Imagine that the moral acts critics, like Senator Clement Clay from Alabama, who called the legislation, quote, one of the most monstrous, iniquitous, and dangerous measures which have ever been submitted to Congress, unquote, had won the day. Imagine, if you will, a world without the University of New Hampshire. Where would all those generations of students have gone to college? What organization would have created or nurtured cooperative extension? It's unlikely that any private institution would have wanted to sink resources into running 4-H programs or helping farmers raise healthier cows or more abundant blueberries. Who would have taken in 3 brothers in the 1920s from a hard-scrabble farm in Walpole, New Hampshire, Oliver, Leslie, and Austin Hubbard, who barely had the proverbial 2 nickels to rub together? Probably not Dartmouth or Harvard. Yet after leaving UNH and returning to Walpole, they bred a chicken, the famous New Hampshire Red, a superior disease-resistant breed that is the great-great-great-grandfowl many times over of 1 in 3 chickens in the world today. How much poorer the planet would be without that source of meat and egg protein, and how much poorer UNH would be. For the Hubbards initiated a tradition of philanthropy, $50 million to date from that family alone, that has touched every corner of this institution, from financial aid for needy students to the Sustainability Institute, from the Center for Genome Studies to climate science, from the Leitzel Center to the Marine School. All of these and more were touched by the Hubbards. How much poorer would American journalism have been without the English department's Don Murray? How much dimmer our intellectual life without the inspired genius of John Irving or Jennifer Lee or Charlie Simic? Where would the Granite State have gotten its best nurses, artists, teachers, and engineers without the University of New Hampshire? For me, it really is a sort of Jimmy Stewart, it's a wonderful life exercise to think in these terms. And the truth is, it's impossible to imagine the rich and vital state and nation that we have become without the University of New Hampshire. So back at least for a minute to my original question, what is the state of the university in 2016? The answer is, we're thriving. During the past 2 years, we've attracted the largest incoming classes ever to UNH. Over the past 5 years, private donations have grown nearly 250%. We've launched new undergraduate degree programs in Manchester to meet the demand in emerging fields such as data analytics and homeland security. Our new master's degree programs in public policy, analytics, and marine biology, and our online program in education are opening exciting opportunities in graduate studies. Our recently launched Center for Social Innovation and Enterprise is taking market-based strategies from the business world and applying them to create sustainable solutions for major social problems. The UNH School of Law has again been ranked among the nation's top 100 law schools by U.S. News & World Report, and it's also ranked 3rd in job placement among New England's law schools. Finally, we've achieved all of this and more in 2015 with true Granite State frugality. Last year, UNH realized nearly $1.5 million in savings simply by operating more efficiently, from the ways we license our intellectual property to how we run our billing services and our copy machines. And here's a final and for me even more compelling way to think about the state of UNH today. Last summer, we worked with the Gallup organization to conduct the most comprehensive study ever of long-term outcomes for our alumni. What's life like for a UNH alum 20 or 30 or even 40 years down the road? We wanted to know. Well, the answer, it turns out, is pretty great. Not only do our graduates outperform their peers in employment and career earnings, that's good enough news in itself, But UNH graduates are 60% more likely than graduates of almost every other institution, including Ivy League institutions, to be thriving in the 4 other key domains that Gallup uses to define a person's quality of life: a sense of purpose, community engagement, social well-being, and physical well-being. It doesn't get better than that. So the next time somebody asks you, is college worth it? You've got a really good answer. UNH is certainly worth it. But what about the next 150 years? Where does that road lead? What can we do now to ensure that our successors in 2166, that hurts my head even to say that, but in 2166 will have a similar great story to tell? Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do have some instincts and some experience, and they both tell me that we need to do at least 5 critical things now to set ourselves on the right course for the next century and a half. First, we need to rededicate ourselves to the primacy of excellence in research, in teaching, in outreach, in everything we do. That sounds uncontroversial and anodyne, but there is tremendous pressure today in higher education to weaken standards, to compromise on quality, and to commodify our work in an effort to keep prices as low as possible. In one sense, that's understandable. College is expensive. Parents and students are burdened with debt. They aren't at all sure what they're getting for their money. They're angry. But the answer is not to walk away from our mission, join the race to the bottom, and mass produce shoddy goods. That course is ruinous in almost every respect. Certainly, it will not lead to Gallup-like outcomes 20 or 30 years from now. Instead, we need to continue to invest in the highest caliber faculty possible, men and women who can meet the full range of UNH's missions. We need to recruit and retain staff of the highest professional standard. We need to compete for the best students. We need to aim high in all things. But at the same time, and this is my second point, we have to be creative in finding new ways to be excellent. Pedagogy in 2166 is not going to look like pedagogy in 2016. Neither are the ways we meet research challenges or engage with community partners. While excellence must be our unalterable standard, we must be endlessly innovative in how we achieve it. Well-educated students, path-breaking discoveries, vibrant communities, these are the outcomes to which we should be committed without compromise. The way we get there should be open to constant discussion and revision. "We've never done it that way before" is a phrase that should be banished from our collective vocabularies. That leads to a third related point. We must do a better job linking what we do with our students while they are with us on our campuses with the lives they lead after they graduate. I mean this in 2 senses. First, we have a responsibility to ensure that our students are employable, that they acquire some skills that are valued in the marketplace. That does not mean that UNH should become a trade school, or that we should steer students away from the liberal arts. God forbid. But it does mean that it is irresponsible to send forth into the world heavily indebted young men and women who are no more fitted to support themselves upon graduation than they were when they arrived as freshmen. All of our students, regardless of major, should be able to land decent jobs. At the same time, and just as important, all of our students, regardless of major, should be able to lead decent lives. The great traditions embodied in the liberal arts and sciences are the pillars of the university and the basis for building full and meaningful lives. We must not abandon that legacy. The nurse or engineer or accountant who by dint of his or her major is able to land that first job in a well-paying field should not be denied the opportunity to stretch and grow and confront life's great questions in a class on pre-Socratic philosophy or a seminar on Shakespeare. Indeed, we need to move beyond the sterile and senseless debate about the purpose of college. Is it for getting a job or learning for life? Is it about the liberal arts or vocation? And embrace both with vigor. Fourth, we absolutely have to do a better job telling our story. Anyone who has paid any attention to the rhetoric of the 2016 presidential race, and living in New Hampshire, it's exceedingly difficult not to pay attention, even if you don't want to, knows that we don't have a lot of friends out there, on the left or on the right. According to our critics, we're overpriced, overstaffed, out of touch, and irrelevant. We're either failing to protect our students or we're coddling them. Our graduates can't write, can't think critically, can't give an oral report, and we're not producing enough of them quickly enough, by the way. I think there's very little, if any, truth to any of these assertions, at least for UNH. Certainly they are contrary to everything I hear from every employer I talk to. But we cannot deny that we in higher education have an image problem, and we need to be active in combating it. In particular, we need to be much more deliberate in measuring what we do. I want to know much more exactly, for instance, what our economic impact is on the state of New Hampshire every year. I want to know what our cultural impact is. I want to know how many K-12 public school teachers and students we affect, how many acres of forest and farms we help steward, how many miles of shoreline our faculty, staff, and alumni monitor and protect, how many businesses benefit from our talent, research, and technical support. In short, I want to be able to tell the Jimmy Stewart story on a real-time, ongoing basis. I am convinced that if we tell that story clearly and authentically and relentlessly, the narrative arc of the higher education story in New Hampshire and in America will turn around completely. But even if we begin to tell our story in more compelling terms, the hard truth is that finances are going to be a continuing challenge for us in the years ahead. We live in a different economic environment than we did 30 years ago, or even 10 years ago. Dollars are much scarcer. The rate of growth in revenue from student tuition is going to have to level off, just given the realities of the marketplace. The odds of the federal government, much less the state of New Hampshire, filling the funding gap are at best very long. In the face of these realities, one thing we can do, one thing we must do, is to make good on the marker we laid down with the UNH strategic plan back in 2010. We need to raise a lot of money from our alumni and friends, and we're going to do just that. So I'm going to close now with a teaser, sort of like the trailer for Star Wars of the new season of Game of Thrones. When we kick off our 150th anniversary celebration this fall, we will simultaneously launch the largest fundraising effort in UNH's history. Let me repeat that. We will launch the largest fundraising campaign in the history of UNH. It will be called Celebrate 150, the Campaign for UNH. You'll begin to see this logo and begin to learn more about our planned celebration in the months ahead. Now, I can hear the first question already. How much are we going to raise? Well, as with Star Wars or the Game of Thrones, you're going to have to buy your metaphorical ticket and show up at the premiere to find out. And in our case, that will be at homecoming on the weekend of September 30th. So mark your calendars now. This is one you're not going to want to miss. Although, truth be told, we're going to spend the whole next year celebrating our anniversary and building momentum for that campaign. And everyone will be invited to participate, from students, faculty, and staff on our campuses in Durham, Concord, and Manchester, to farmers in Coos County and alumni in California. There will be opportunities for everyone to put on a hat and blow out some candles. And together, through the Campaign for UNH, we will harness Wildcat pride and generate unparalleled support for this great university and put our successors in position to celebrate an even more wonderful tricentennial. That concludes my formal remarks, but I encourage you all to stay for our town hall meeting. And again, for those of you who haven't submitted your questions already, you can tweet them to hashtag UNHSOTU or email them to sotu.unh@unh.edu. Thank you, everyone. Let's move on to our town hall, and it's a great day to be a Wildcat. Every day is a great day to be a Wildcat. Thanks, guys.
Mark, like we did last year, we're going to move between some questions that we received through email ahead of time, as well as questions coming in through Twitter, as well as taking questions here from the room. We'll start out with a question that came in through email from Professor Jeff Diefendorf from the History Department. He'd like to hear you talk about the current status of renovations of buildings and future renovations or new construction plans on campus. The physical changes in the campus are things that might be presented in events for the upcoming 150th anniversary.
Great. Is the wireless mic working? Can I wander around? Scott? Yes? Okay, good. Yeah, Professor Diefendorf, thank you for that question. I was told the other day that we have, as we sit here, approximately $160 million worth of renovations going on now, which is terrific. I think everybody who comes back to campus can see the transformations that are taking place. First and foremost, of course, Ham Smith, which will be a real jewel in another year or so. I get to kind of watch out my window every day at that construction going on. I think it's really exciting. The Hamel Rec Center is looming over the new outdoor pool, both of which will be wonderful additions to the campus. The build out at Cowell Stadium is proceeding apace. The weather that I joked about earlier has actually had us not only on track but ahead of schedule in a lot of these projects, so that's all good news. There are still some things that we need to attend to, obviously, and Jeff, I know you live in one of those buildings that really does need to be attended to probably more rapidly than everyone there would like. And we're working as fast as we can to chip away at as many of the deferred maintenance challenges that we've got. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to them all as fast as we would like, but they're certainly on the list. If the state is generous, or more importantly, if the state is wise in its own self-interest and is able to step forward and help us meet the extraordinary demand for more engineers and computer scientists and people in the biosciences in particular, they will help us do a build out of our bioscience facilities in the years to come. But that's still on the drawing board. So that's kind of an update of where we are. And again, I'd like to do more than we're doing, but we're doing all that resources will allow. And if there's anybody in the audience who's still looking for a big commitment to make for that upcoming capital campaign, the Center for the Arts is still closest to my heart, and I'm waiting for that lead donor, so don't be shy.
Eric is going to ask the next question that came in from Twitter.
Mark, the climate doctor wants to know if you foresee a time when tenure-track faculty will be appointed directly in interdisciplinary colleges and schools.
Boy, that's a great question. For those of you who didn't hear, is there a time when tenure-track faculty will be appointed in interdisciplinary schools or entities? I'd love to see that happen. Right now, we're bound by an agreement with the faculty that constrains that. I'm delighted to tell you, just as a factoid, that our new provost to be, Nancy Target, whom I know we're all excited to see arrive, asked as her very first question of me, would it be possible to arrange her primary appointment in interdisciplinary school? She wanted to signal her commitment to interdisciplinarity. And I had to tell her, as my first answer to her question, no. But yeah, I very much hope we see that someday. I think, I've said before that the world has problems, universities have departments, and it would be nice if we got to be as interdisciplinary in our approach to things as the rest of the world is.
Another question that came in through email from Professor Pistoli, hope I'm pronouncing that right, Professor of Microbiology. UNH strives for excellence as both a research and a teaching institution. Sometimes at the local level, it seems as if our priorities and limited resources are shifted too much in one direction. From your comprehensive perspective, how is UNH doing in achieving this balance, and it is a sustainable goal?
I think that was Tom Pistol, by the way. And the question again, are we achieving the right balance between teaching and research? And I assume probably our outreach mission would be implicit in the question. And I thank him for granting me a more comprehensive perspective. I'm not sure that's true, but the quick answer is yes, I think we do. I think that one of the things that makes this place really, really special, and I say that not just because I'm part of it, but I really believe that UNH is special, and it's borne out in the data that we got from Gallup, is that we get that balance right. That nobody knows for sure why our graduates are as successful as they are all those years down the road. But I think one of the reasons is we've got, first and foremost, a faculty and professional staff who deeply love this place, deeply love students, and put them at the heart of everything they do, far above and beyond the formal requirements of their jobs. But that in turn isn't enough. I mean, that's essential. It's absolutely an essential condition for our success, but it's not enough. And I say that because you can go to a lot of liberal arts colleges where you find similar kinds of commitment from faculty and staff, but they don't have the same kind of results many years out. What we have in addition to that is this sort of exciting environment that is a product of the research intensivity of UNH that mates with that commitment from our faculty and staff, that gives students opportunities they wouldn't have anyplace else. Now, do we get the balance right from everybody's perspective all the time? Probably not. There are some people who wish we could do more of this or more of that, but I think on the whole, we do a pretty remarkable job. Every statistic I look at that asks how well we do, for instance, in research, shows us consistently punching above our weight. And we do more research, more funded research in particular, per capita, per faculty member than almost anybody. Our teaching is second to none, as borne out by the data that we collect when students graduate, by a variety of other metrics. So yes, I believe that we get that balance just about right almost all the time.
Before we go to the audience, we've had several students via Twitter and email ask about divestment. In particular, Griffin wants to know if you think students should have a say in how the endowment is invested.
Well, I think students do have a say, and we've made a lot of opportunities available for our students who are especially passionate about this issue to talk to key members of our foundation board who are in charge of managing at least that part of UNH's investment portfolio. I know that as a result of expressed student interest and leadership from students, we in fact created, as part of the UNH Foundation's suite of options for donors, something called an ESG sleeve, an environmental social governance sleeve, which allows donors to direct their funds to investment vehicles that are vetted for their environmental sensibility, their governance concerns, their social concerns. So we definitely listen to our students. That's not to say that students can by themselves direct where our investments go. No one can do that on their own. We live in a system of shared governance where a lot of people have their hand on the wheel. And I always try to remind myself and others who ask about these issues that these dollars ultimately, they're not my dollars, they're not your dollars, they're not even the foundation board members' dollars. They're the dollars of the people who gave them to the University of New Hampshire. We hold them in trust, not for ourselves, but for future generations of UNH students. So we have to be very, very careful about how we manage those investments.
Let's open it up to questions in the room and see who wants to ask a question.
Yeah.
I know that the primary is this Monday, and I was
No. It's on Tuesday.
Yeah, my bad. Well, anyway, I was hoping, because I have a lot of class on both days, and I know a lot of other students do too, and getting out the vote is extremely important. So I was just here to ask you whether or not you'd consider giving class off that day.
It would probably be easier to move the primary than it would be to to cancel classes. I actually have no control over that, and I also think that a lot of us are busy and we work, even those of us who aren't students, and we can usually find the half an hour or hour it takes to get over to the polling place and cast our vote, even while carrying on other responsibilities. So the short answer is probably no, and even those who control classes, I suspect, aren't going to be interested in doing that. That said, as a political scientist, if I could put on another hat, I would note that almost all other Western democracies schedule their voting on days when people aren't otherwise engaged, and usually on a Sunday. And I'd be all in favor of that. I think it would maximize voting opportunities for everyone. And we have a pretty anemic turnout, as you probably know, in America in general, and in primary elections in particular. I think it's probably down 15, 20% in a good turnout. So I'm sympathetic to the question, but I think that's probably not the right way to approach it for us. Yeah, Barb.
We had a series of great conversations on campus this past year, and is there a report that's going to be released, or some way that we can all get around hearing what the results were?
Absolutely. Without wanting to make assumptions about your question, I assume when you say we had great conversations, you're talking about conversations around race and how to ensure that we have as healthy a climate as possible at UNH. And we did, thanks to the good offices of New Hampshire Listens, organize a series of conversations here at Durham and in Manchester and at Concord at the law school. And I'm very grateful to Jamie Nolan for helping to make that happen. And the answer is yes. A report has been compiled and will shortly be released, I think, and it will draw together the threads of all of the bits of the conversations that took place, and I think we'll find it useful and informative. Yeah. I can repeat it. Yeah, go ahead.
Over 1,500 students here at UNH, Bernie, O'Malley, and the head of the World Bank have advocated for divestment. Do you not value these opinions?
Sure. I value their opinions. I just think other people have opinions too. Got time for one more divestment question, which I know is coming from the fellow in the plaid shirt.
Thank you. Back at your Donuts with Mark event back in December, I think it was, a few friends of mine and myself gave you some studies showing the profitability of divestment. I'm just curious, have you read those yet? And if so, what do you think?
I did read them, and I think there are good arguments on both sides of the question as to whether a portfolio free of fossil fuels is as robust as a portfolio with fossil fuels.
Mark, back to a question that came in through email from Stephanie Bernier from the Center for Academic Resources. For the 2014-15 academic year, UNH was successful in enrolling our largest and most inclusive incoming class ever. What is your vision for retaining those students, and how will student affairs resources be allocated to maintain the university's strong retention and graduation rates?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've got really strong feelings on it. First, the premise of the question is largely right, and that is that UNH traditionally has had really good retention numbers, especially in the ones that most people pay attention to are first to second year retention, meaning that we hang on to more of our freshmen and see them successfully become sophomores than most of our peer institutions. We do well, traditionally in the mid to high 80s. 80 percentages. I pay a lot of attention to it because before I did this, I was president of Ohio Wesleyan University, and it was the biggest problem that they faced. And I spent my whole first year there trying to help sort that out. And unlike our peer institutions out there in Ohio, which routinely had retention rates like we do here at UNH, they were mired in the mid to high 70s. And it becomes a real challenge when we get numbers like that for a lot of different reasons. So I do pay a lot of attention to it. I think that as we have seen larger classes, the challenges for retention are going to grow greater. It's going to be harder because we haven't been able to grow our faculty and staff commensurate with the size of the incoming class, unfortunately. That's just a fact of economic life, which means more pressure is put on everybody to do more to achieve the same outcomes. So we are going to have to be even more thoughtful and mindful about what makes for strong retention if we want to keep those numbers as good as they are. So to that point, I've actually asked Vasu, our excellent interim provost, and Victoria Dutcher, our equally excellent and new vice president for enrollment management, to oversee a small task force to focus on exactly that problem and to come forward with some recommendations to ensure that UNH will have great retention going forward. Let me say just one more thing about it, because you'll probably hear from them, all of us will hear from them in the weeks and months ahead. There is a great temptation when talking about retention, especially in institutions that have got retention problems, which fortunately we do not right now, but there's a great temptation to point fingers and to blame other people for declining retention numbers. The admissions office traditionally will point to student life and say, you know, you're kicking too many students out, or your student life will point to the admissions office, or they'll both point to the faculty for having too high of standards, and everybody points at everybody else. The truth is that in an institution that has retention issues, or even in those that want to increase their retention, it's an everybody problem. It's an all hands on deck, let's see what we all need to do to make sure that we can solve this thing. So do pay attention to this one, and do expect to hear from Victoria and Vasu and colleagues in the weeks ahead as we try to make sure that we move our numbers even higher.
We have another question by email from a student who's interested in learning more about how your administration has worked to ensure the needs of students are met through their student government.
Wow. Well, the essence of student government is that it is student government, and I think that our student government has been remarkable in its work ethic and its the extent to which it really has made an effort to figure out what students want and to work diligently, not only with me, but with all the members of the administration, with our board of trustees, and with others to make sure that happens. So there's not much I can add to their effectiveness other than my commitment to work with them, as I very much enjoy doing and expect to continue to do, to address UNH's challenges. As I said of retention, almost everything that we face is an us problem or an us challenge. It's not a Mark problem or a Chris Clement problem or a Vasu problem. It's things that involve all of us kind of buckling down and working together to solve. And I think I've had great partners in our student government, and expect we will in the years to come too.
Let's go back to the room, see if there's any other questions in the room.
Oh, yeah. Mike.
Terrific. Well, first, I just want to thank you for doing this kind of back and forth town hall style. I think we're all really appreciative of being able to air these questions. So my question, Mike Verney, the Vice President of the Graduate Student Senate, is what do you see as being the current state, the future, and also the role of doctoral education here at UNH?
Boy, that's a really good question. You know, it's the role of doctoral education at UNH, and one could really expand it. Those of us who have lived in academic life think more generally about the role of doctoral education in America. There are a lot of disciplines, including your own nationally, that are arguably at a kind of crisis point in terms of the sustainability of a lot of doctoral programs. The market, owing to forces that are just beyond the control of seemingly any of us individually, have put a great deal of pressure on humanities disciplines, on a lot of social science disciplines. My own son just got a PhD in philosophy just a few years ago, and that's a pretty miserable job market for students in that field. But more specifically about UNH, I would say that we should continue to do what I think we've done for many years, and that's to pick a handful of areas where we know we can be excellent in the doctoral education that we provide and go all in on those, and not to try, and I don't think you were implying, and I don't think anybody's implying that we're doing this, but I would not want to see us try to multiply doctoral programs willy-nilly just for the sake of having more doctoral programs. I can remember years ago when I was a faculty member feeling guilty occasionally about admitting students to our doctoral program, really unsure what their market prospects were. And I think we as faculty members have to be mindful of that there's sometimes a temptation to admit students to programs because it helps our own research program or because it reflects our own importance as a department. And that's a problem I hope that we can begin to address nationally at the level of professional associations and otherwise to try to get a better balance between supply and demand in a lot of doctoral programs. But for UNH in particular, I think that we've got some fabulous doctoral programs, and yours is one of them. Our history program is one of the best in America, and we all should be proud of that, and we should do everything we can to support programs like that. And I'll stop talking about this, but let me just say one more thing. I do think that there is room for growth for UNH PhDs. I think that we can be producing more PhDs, not by multiplying programs in areas where students don't have a chance of getting employed, but we do some really first-class research currently in areas where we don't have doctoral programs. We could have doctoral programs, or where we could have more doctoral production than we do. And I've been urging my colleagues to think about that, and I think in the year ahead, we'll be talking to the deans more about how we can do that. Part of UNH being a flagship public research institution is having internationally recognized doctoral programs. And we want to make sure that where we have strengths, where we can have great programs, we do have great programs. Yeah.
Would you be willing to freeze administrative salaries and lower administrative bonuses in order to lower the tuition for students?
You know, short answer, no. And I'll tell you why. Let me go back to what I said earlier in my talk. I think that the way we are going to succeed long-term as an institution is by being excellent, by being as great as we possibly can be. It's tempting for people like me standing up here, for politicians to give glib answers to make people feel better, but that will not work. I mean, it'll make people feel good in the short term, but in the long term, what it'll do is make it impossible for me to hire really good people. Our commitment is to pay everyone at the 50th percentile of the competitive market. Let me say that again. Our commitment as a university, actually the entire university system, has a commitment to pay people at the 50th percentile of the labor market for their job. So we're not overpaying people, we're not underpaying people. If we start to say, well, let's pay people at the 30th percentile and we can save a few bucks and we can freeze tuition, that'll work for a year or two, but very, very soon it's going to be a drip, drip, drip effect, and we're going to start losing people to other institutions who will then start doing better research and attracting more students and doing all the other things universities have to do to survive in a competitive marketplace. So I am absolutely committed to holding the line and not overpaying people. We never want to overpay people, but neither do we want to underpay people.
Does that 50th percentile factor in bonuses as well?
It does. It does. Actually, the formal policy at the university system under which I operate and everybody operates is to identify the total compensation package for individuals and have that total compensation package be at the 50th percentile. Or actually, strictly speaking, if you go and read the policy in the handbook, it says our target compensation is between the 45th percentile and the 60th percentile, depending upon the level of qualifications of the individuals.
Mark, a related question while we're on the topic of salaries came in through email, specific to staff salaries. UNH staff salary increases have been far below the inflation rate for the past 7 or 8 years. This means we are losing money working at UNH. We are losing purchasing power year after year, making it increasingly difficult to live. When will this turn around, and when will we begin seeing meaningful cost of living increases? And this came in from Rob Sink-Mars.
Okay. Well, I have to say that I'm not at all sure I agree with the premise of that question. The premise being that, in fact, salary increases have been well below the rate of inflation. I don't have those numbers stored at the top, off the top of my head, but it's contrary to everything I believe that we have tried to do. I know in the last few years we have provided on average 3% increases for our salaried staff. Maybe the complaint or the concern embedded in the question has to do with the divide between across-the-board raises and merit raises. And it is true that we have tried to put more money, relatively speaking, into performance-based pay as opposed to across-the-board pay. And that's true both for salaried staff. It's absolutely true for administrators, where we try to make an even larger percentage of their pay performance-based and performance-driven. But I really don't think the premise is true. I think inflation, even if you use the higher ed inflation index as opposed to general inflation, has been running no more than 2 or maybe 2.5% last year in some of the statistics. The general level of inflation is even lower than that. But I go back to the answer that I gave this young man a minute ago. If it were true, I'd be really worried about it, because I am committed to fair pay, market-based pay for everyone. I don't care what job one has at UNH. We should try to pay at the median for all positions. So if the premise turns out to be true, which again I don't think it is, then I'll have some cause for concern, but I will certainly look into that further.
Mark, we had a question that came in over email from a student wondering about UNH plans to become more veteran-friendly.
Yeah, I hope that is a continuing success that we can talk about at UNH. I hope, probably not everybody does know that in the last 6 months we have stood up and equipped a veterans center at UNH, actually on the 3rd floor of T Hall, which I think has already become well used and a place for veterans to hang out and talk to one another and with support staff. I'd like to see us do even more. Of course, that's a phrase I use a lot, because there are a lot of things I'd love to see UNH do more, but we're resource strapped and we do as much as we can. But I think that the resources that we have put in place will serve veterans well. And as we get feedback from them and find out what additional areas they're looking for help in, we'll try to be responsive. I don't know. I think people are hungry or something. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Klein. I'm a history major, so thank you for the shadow right over there. But I'm actually a very proud member of the Catback Captains, the superfan group on campus. And we would like to extend an invitation to you on Wednesday, 7:30 at Stoke Hall. We would like to have your presence there whenever you have the time for it. But my main question is, the men's basketball team is playing on Monday, February 8th against the University of Maine. How do you think they'll do?
Actually, we're now, in 4th place, right? Which is, do we hit 3rd? Oh, because we just won. Yeah, right. Hey, Peter, how are you? I didn't see you sitting there. I think we'll beat Maine for sure. We ought to be able to do that. I hesitated only because I went to the Vermont game on the weekend, and it shook my confidence just a little bit. But yeah, I'd love to join you at Stoke some evening, and just remind me on that day. And I can't be at the Maine game because I have to be at an alumni event in Florida actually on Monday.
Yeah, another one down here, Mike.
We had another email question from a former USNH trustee and 2012 graduate, Kurt Eddins, who says, I've sadly seen many of my successful peers head out of the state to pursue careers. I'm curious to hear about how UNH is doing with regard to keeping alumni in state compared to other schools, and what steps are being taken to move us forward.
Yeah, boy, that is a concern that people across New Hampshire express. And at one level, I share it. I would love to see more UNH grads. I'd love to see more young people as a whole stay in New Hampshire. But you know, as the father of a couple of young people myself, including one recent college graduate, I've got some insight into why they don't. And you know, and we know this from our own demographers here at the Carsey School. If you're 22, 23 years old, and whether you just graduated from UNH or from Dartmouth or from wherever, it is far more exciting to go to Washington or New York or Boston or some other big city than it is, no offense, Todd, to settle in Durham for the first few years of your professional life. The job opportunities are greater. You know, the nightclubs are better. I mean, all that stuff, right? But what we know from the demography, this is why I don't get worried about it ultimately. What Ken Johnson and others tell us is that people leave in their 20s and they come back in their 30s and 40s. And that is an observation that is supported by just a wealth of data. And so A, there's probably not much we can do about it. But B, long run, we're not in bad shape as a state. We are going to get folks coming back here because it's a wonderful place to live. It's a wonderful place to raise a family, and I think we'll be okay.
Another question on email is looking for an update on the progress to connect the UNH campuses via regularly scheduled bus service.
Ooh. If you had asked me that question, a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, I would have been able to tap dance and say, I really think it's going to happen. I've said this for years, but I just got an email from Chris last week or so who laid out the ugly numbers. And the numbers were partly to do with costs, but actually most of the numbers had to do with ridership. And what we learned through a systematic survey of would-be riders in Manchester and here, I think maybe in Concord too, is that just not that many people would sign up. I haven't gotten back to him yet, and what I was planning to say to him when I got back to him was, well, that may be true in terms of the survey, but it's been my experience that sometimes it takes doing something before people know they want to do it. So I really haven't given up. But I'm not quite as optimistic as I was a week and a half ago. So if you get surveyed, tell them you'll take the bus. Help me out here. All right, one more question. If there are any, or maybe they aren't. All right, I can just wish everyone a happy Groundhog's Day. And if you don't win the lottery and can't make it to the debate on Thursday night, you can at least tune in on TV or stand outside and wave whatever sign you want to wave when the media is present. But thank you so much for coming to this, and I look forward to seeing you all as the year progresses.